Good morning and good new year. My name is Lauren, and if you're new here, which I'm assuming you are because this is my first video, welcome to Drawing Conclusions. I am a book lover and I'm also an aspiring artist, and I'm trying to combine the two things that I love most into kind of one idea. I would love to write a graphic novel one day. I just don't feel like my skills are quite there yet. So I'm designing covers of the books that I'm reading as if they were going to be a graphic novel. At the same time, I'm going to give a plot summary and a review of the books that I'm reading. So if you love books or you love art, hopefully this is a place you want to be. The way it works is that first I'm going to give a little synopsis of the book. If you want to read the book and you don't want any spoilers, I'm just going to give like a brief introduction so that if you're interested, you can go and read the book and come back later. If you're not interested in the book at all, or you've already read the book and you just want to press forward, I'm then going to give a summary of what the events of the book. Do a little story time about what happens because I just love telling people what happens in the book, especially when the book is as crazy as this one. Last of all, I'm going to give my review of the book, talk about the things I liked, the things I didn't like, and give a rating for the book as well. At the very end, I'll go over some of the art that I did and give you a list of books that I will read in the future if you wanted to read what I'm going to read. So, let's jump into it. The book that I read is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. It was written in May 2023, last year, and it's a horror. I saw that it made the list of like the Goodreads Book of the Year awards for horror, I think. I came across this book probably on TikTok. Probably there. None of my friends really read horror. It's a genre that I'm just kind of getting into myself recently. So I'm assuming that I saw it somewhere on social media. And because the end of the year was approaching and I really needed to hit my Goodreads goal, and this book is very short, I thought it would be perfect. And it was. It was a lot of fun to read. The book is about a mermaid. Yes, like that mermaid, who teams up with a plague doctor, maybe not actually a doctor, but somebody in a plague doctor mask. They decide to travel together after both of their kingdoms have kind of crumbled. And they travel together through the woods and they run into a cult, for lack of a better word. Of course, chaos ensues. It's a really interesting premise. I know it sounds like a lot of different elements, but they blend together really well. So I would definitely recommend it. However, strong content warning. There's a lot of violence, a lot of body horror, cannibalism, murder, all the good stuff. Anything related to kind of like bodily destruction is in there. If that is something that you cannot handle, I would skip this one. It is okay, but if it's something that you feel like you can handle, I would read it. It's short, it's an easy read, and I really enjoyed it. So let's get into the plot. We open on the ashes of this ruined kingdom. The mermaid, who was forcibly taken by the prince. It's not the Little Mermaid. It's the anti-Disney version of the Little Mermaid. The mermaid was taken forcibly by the prince and had his kids, and their kids are just as monstrous as she is and devoured everybody in the kingdom, leaving nothing left. She is sitting in the ashes of this ruined kingdom when she makes friends with the plague doctor, or at least somebody in a plague doctor mask. I don't think they're actually a doctor, but I'm going to call them the plague doctor just for simplicity's sake. She makes friends with the plague doctor, and they decide to travel together on to the next kingdom. I think her plan is just to start somewhere new. Maybe she'll end up destroying that kingdom too. Maybe she'll start a life. Who knows? She's just gonna play it by ear. She and the plague doctor travel together through the woods, through the night, and they decide to stop and rest. They're sitting around this campfire having a moment when it's revealed that the plague doctor is actually a kind of Frankenstein creature. They're cobbled together from other people's parts. They have like soft scars across their face where they've been stitched together. So it's an interesting companionship. The mermaid is a mythical creature, and so is this plague doctor. I get the sense that this is a world familiar with magic, so it's not crazy that maybe that they have run into each other, but they form this connection with one another as they are sitting around this campfire when these boys burst through the forest. There's a group of boys chasing this younger, smaller boy. And this group of boys catches up to the younger, smaller boy and kill him in front of the mermaid and the plague doctor. Obviously, they are horrified at this turn of events, but they don't really know how to react. The plague doctor is kind of like, you can't do that. And the boys go, no, it's okay. It's part of the game. It was his turn. We all take turns hunting and killing each other because the saints in our village will just resurrect him. This intrigues the plague doctor and the mermaid, and they decide to go into this village. The boys want to show them what they're talking about. So they lead the mermaid and the plague doctor into this settlement. In this village of sorts, everybody there is a child. Everybody, they're all children. A little creepy, but it's about to get worse. The leaders of this settlement are known as the surgeons, or the kids will call them the saints. I will probably refer to them as the surgeons from here on out. They bring the boy that they had killed, guts out and all, to the surgeons, and the surgeons start this ritual where they cut off body parts, they put body parts into the boy, they take some of his parts out. It's a whole process. The mermaid and the plague doctor are watching in horrified fascination, and then eventually the boy is brought back to life in this grotesque scene where he is screaming, and it's just awful. So yeah. The mermaid and the plague doctor decide to stay in this village for the next little while to kind of get to the bottom of what is going on, and also maybe partially to help the kids realize that this is not a cool situation and that they should leave. I should also mention that this entire book takes place over the course of 3 days. This is already the end of the first day, so we are a third of the way through the book. It is very short. The next morning, the mermaid wakes up, goes back to the scene of the ritual. Her main source of food is other people. She eats people. And last night, the surgeons left some of the parts there at the scene of the ritual. And she said, don't mind if I do, and eats them. This is going to upset the surgeons later. In fact, later when the plague doctor and the mermaid go into breakfast to visit all the children and the surgeons, they notice that the surgeons have different eyes. They took the eyes of some of the children who are now missing. What they realize is happening is that the surgeons want immortality, and they figured out how to use other people to replace their own body parts so that they can keep living. They're living in this village under the guise of gods, and the children worship them and will do whatever they want. They just want immortality. So they are using the children however they want, whenever they want, and the children are just worshiping them. The plague doctor realizes this is a messed up situation and wants to save the kids. The mermaid honestly doesn't care that much, but she likes the plague doctor and is willing to just go along with whatever they want. So even though she doesn't super care about the kids, she cares that the plague doctor cares. So they decide to stay in the village to see what they can do to free the children from the shackles of these crazy cult leaders. They go and talk to the little boy who was resurrected the night before and kind of plant a seed in him that maybe this isn't the place he wants to be. He's still pretty messed up from what happened to him the night before, and they put in him this idea that that he could leave, that he could go away, and that maybe this whole thing is wrong. Later on, the mermaid is talking to the surgeons at dinner, and one of the surgeons mentions that they are interested in her biology because she's a mermaid. And she says that she will answer whatever questions they want if she can see the ritual again tonight. And they agree. They go through the ritual. They don't resurrect anybody, but they go through this process of cutting off their own hand and removing their own heart. It's this whole deal. That night, the mermaid and the plague doctor hatch a plan to show the children that the people leading this cult are not who they say they are. They are not gods, they are fallible, and the kids are in real danger. In order to do this, the mermaids eat some of the entrails left behind by the surgeons, and instead, they put animal parts in their place to kind of fool the surgeons into putting animal parts in their body instead of people parts. Sorry, I warned you that this book was going to be gory. It is. So, the third day, the mermaid and the plague doctor wake up to screaming and wailing and gnashing of teeth. They go outside and realize that one of the surgeon has replaced his own eyes with the eyes of a lynx, like a cat. And he is not having a good time because you are not supposed to put animal parts in your body. You're only supposed to put people parts. The kids are kind of gathered around this situation, and they see that they don't know exactly what's going on with their surgeon leader, but it's not good. The surgeon is having this kind of combative argument with the plague doctor. Again, the plague doctor is the one who cares. The mermaid is just kind of along for the ride. They're having this argument with them while the lynx eyes are in their head, and the plague doctor is like, look, see, they aren't who you think they are. This is not a good situation. While this is happening, all of a sudden they hear screaming coming from this like hut, this like little house. Everybody, the mermaid, the plague doctor, and all the kids rush over to this house. They go inside and they see one of the surgeons. Sorry, it's about to get gross. They see one of the surgeons eating and butchering this little girl. Like, he's ripping her open and eating her like guts, like organs. It's really disgusting. And the mermaid and the plague doctor go, oh, this is terrible, but maybe it's going to show the kids that they're terrible. And in fact, one of the little boys, the little boy that was resurrected, that they kind of put the seed of dissent into, he goes, yeah, this is terrible. This is not right. This is bad. And all of the kids turn on him and turn on the plague doctor and the mermaid and knock them out. So, yeah. The mermaid wakes up after being knocked out. She is being actively vivisected, which is like a live surgery. She is awake for it, and it is happening to her. One of the surgeons is taking apart her body to study. Luckily for the mermaid, she's pretty clever, and she manages to trick the surgeon into getting close enough that she bites him and ends up eating him. All of him. Leaves nothing left. Destroys him. She breaks free. She goes out into the settlement. Nobody is there, and a blizzard is happening. It is windy, it is snowing, it is cold. She starts to head into the woods and realizes that the plague doctor is being hunted by the kids. In the same way that in the beginning of the story, the kids were hunting that one little boy, they are now hunting the plague doctor, except I don't think that they have any intentions of bringing the plague doctor back. She heads into the woods, worried for the plague doctor. I haven't talked a lot about their relationship through this whole synopsis because it's kind of hard to cover the growth of a relationship in a summary, but they have like drawn a lot closer. Like I said, the mermaid didn't really care about the kids in this village. She cared that the plague doctor cared. She feels this sense of loyalty to them and wants to do what they want her to do. Even though like they haven't known each other that long, she feels a really strong connection to the plague doctor. So the mermaid heads into the forest. It's freezing. There's little spots of blood. She follows the blood and eventually makes it to the plague doctor, who is mortally wounded. She finds them and they have kind of this, what they think is going to be a final goodbye. Plague doctor is this Frankenstein type, so the mermaid doesn't know how exactly mortal they are, but in this moment they're feeling a lot of things for each other and they end up confessing their love, which I know sounds surprising if you haven't read the book as I'm saying this, but it was not surprising to me as I was reading it. Okay, I was like not shocked. It was kind of this very tender moment where they admitted their feelings for one another, and the mermaid openly admits that she is afraid of the plague doctor dying because she does not want to be alone. She's been in such a horrible situation for so long. This is kind of the first person who has ever treated her as a friend, and she doesn't want to lose that. She sees the plague doctor as someone really special to her, and yet they are in this situation where the plague doctor probably isn't going to make it. As they're having this kind of final goodbye, they are interrupted by the surgeons and the children who come out of the woods. Surgeons and the children decide to burn both the mermaid and the plague doctor alive. They tie up the plague doctor and the mermaid. Plague doctor and the mermaid have this kind of final tender moment where they're sharing parts of their life as the fire is catching. The plague doctor ends up getting burned alive. The mermaid, in her grief, has this kind of phoenix-like transformation. when I read it, it was kind of like an explosion of power. I couldn't tell if it was wrought by the fire or if it was wrought by her emotional outburst. But whatever it was, it ends up killing all of the kids and all of the surgeons. They are gone. The fire dies down and there is nothing left of the plague doctor, but the mermaid is left alive. The mermaid takes whatever parts are left of the plague doctor. In the epilogue, she has committed her life to the science of bringing someone back from the dead. Using these parts left over from the plague doctor, she's able to resurrect them, and they kind of live happily ever after. Yeah, kind of a surprising end to a book this dark. But that is the entire summary of the plot. So, let's get into my review. The first thing I want to talk about is the writing style. I liked it, but I don't think it would have worked for a longer book. I think that the length that the book was perfect for what the author was trying to accomplish. The writing style was very prose-like. It was very poetic to read. I'll give you a little snippet. This is from the first page, so even though I've already given you the whole plot, there's no spoilers. I pause. In the penumbra, the fading dusk, gorgetted by coral and gold, you could be forgiven for mistaking the ruined house a rib cage, the roof its tent of ragged skin. The foundation, at a careless look, could pass for bones, the door for a mouth, the chimney a finger crooked at the sky or at a wife who would not be a savior. It's good stuff. It really is. It's almost so like flowery that at times I couldn't quite tell what was going on. But I would like reread it and then be like, oh, okay, that's what she's trying to say. After a while, it got a little difficult to read. It got a little bit old, I'm not gonna lie. In her prosaic style, the author had a tendency to kind of list things. I know, I'm getting really picky at this point, but like, let me give you an example. And this happens over and over again. It's really beautiful. It's just kind of the same pattern over and over. We continue on at the last pine and the aspen give way to cottages and flickering candlelight. Silhouettes behind grubby windows. Dirt roads and anemic gardens. A salty fragrance of wood smoke and baking bread. You're like, okay. But like later. The ribs of roof expand to a steepled point, its rungs lashed with nooses strung with drying herbs. Dill, tarragon, purple opal, basil, savory, wreaths of smoked black garlic. As for the furnishings, they are ascetic. A bed of sweet-smelling hay with a threadbare duvet, a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, a single cabinet to hold whatever possessions we might have. Another, duller, vaguer, distributed across the longitude of my abdomen. Blinking to sluggish awareness, I had anticipated the memory of the fisherman's knife, a tactile delirium inherited from past incarnations. Incisions made along the spine, the skin drying to salt crust, being peeled back after it's first been loosened by a blade, the air blistering on bare muscle, an experience like drowning. These are all really, really beautiful examples of prose. However, I feel like after a while, this pattern of listing things, I don't really have another way to say it. It just starts to get kind of old. It's giving like second semester creative writing, where the writing stops being beautiful and feels like someone who's just trying to write beautifully. At least that's how it felt for me. I read This Is How You Lose the Time War earlier this year, and the prose style is similar in the way that it's so like beautifully crafted that sometimes I had to reread a paragraph to figure out what was going on. Not in a bad way, I just had to do it. I compared the two prose styles, and I feel like This Is How You Lose the Time War just did it better. The author of The Salt Grows Heavy just kind of falls into the same pattern over and over again. And when I notice this pattern too heavily, it stops being impactful and starts just being another paragraph I have to read without any meaning. So while I did really like the prose, it started to wear on me just a little bit by the end of the book. That isn't to say that I hated it all the time. Like, I'm gonna read you one more, sorry. The older children weaponized stories, accounts of their fastidiousness, descriptions of a fox they sighted in the woods, its tail a tongue of blood, philosophies newly improvised from the wisdom they'd culled from the guts of a stag, anything that might elicit attention, a glance, the curve of a smile, or best of all, a word of approval, more precious than any opal. Again, the pattern of listing things is there, but sometimes she just strung words together that were so beautiful. Like, it really was a delight to read. It got old after a while, but it was still a delight. And she used words that I'd never even heard before, like gorgetted. Adding that one to my vocabulary. Again, I think that this works perfectly for a book that is shorter like this. If this were to go on and on for like 400 pages, I think I would get tired. But it didn't. It was like the perfect short read, and I ended up really enjoying it. Now, the premise of the story, I think, was incredibly interesting. When I first read the synopsis of the book, I was a little wary of starting just because it seemed like there were so many elements that she was trying to combine. I have read books before where I'm like, if you just stuck with this one idea, it would have been so cool. But instead, you tossed in a lot of different things, and now it's not really blending together well. And I do not think that is the case for this book. Even though you've got this dark twist of the mermaid story, and you've got this random Frankensteinian plague doctor, and you've got this mysterious cult in the woods, any one of those things alone would have made for an interesting story. When you combine them all, I feel like they reflected really well on what the theme was. So despite having all these different kinds of characters and ideas in the same story, they all really shined light on each other in a way that I don't think would have been possible without the other elements. I think that she did a really good job. If you are new to the world of horror, this would be a good one to start with if you can handle the body horror. If you can't, maybe go for something a little different, but I thought it was really great. I really enjoyed it for what it was. The purpose of the book, however, whether the book fulfilled its purpose or not, though, I think is where I have my main issue. To me, good horror means that you use an element that is actually viscerally terrifying. Something that we think of as scary, like ghosts or murder or witches or what have you. But then you use that to shed light on an issue that is actually terrifying. I don't know if anyone here has ever read the book Hex, but that book, oh my gosh, it did what it needed to do. I'm not sure this book did what it needed to do. Now, the actual scary part of the book, if we're looking surface level, the scary part of the book was the body horror and the cannibalism and this overwhelming sense of like ominous dread as you read, where you don't know what's going to happen, but you know it's going to be gross and terrible. And then eventually it is. I do not want to be walking through the woods and stumble upon a cannibalistic cult that can bring people back to life in the most horrible way possible. That would be scary to me. I would want to leave. But I think the concept deep down that is actually scary is the idea that your life, at least to these people, doesn't matter. The only function that you have, and I use the royal you here, not you specifically, the only function that you have is the body parts that you contain. You are the sum of your parts. You are worthless if not for the use that you have for other people. In this case, literally. I don't mean like your usefulness in society. I mean like, if you cannot give your eyes up, then you are nothing. And I think that when we see these kids just kind of subject themselves to this fate and give up the idea that they are worth anything at all and just choose to put all of their faith into these false gods, willingly giving up their body without a second thought, that is the terrible idea. The antagonists of this story are obviously the surgeons. They are the leaders of this cult, and they are the one rallying the kids against the mermaid and the plague doctor. What I think is really interesting, though, is that the mermaid almost acts as a foil for the surgeons. When you take a step back, the mermaid and the surgeons share a lot of similar traits. The surgeons eat people and use their parts to survive. The mermaid eats people and uses their parts to survive. The surgeons have this vague disregard for the kids. I mean, they take care of the kids, but in the end, the kids are there to be used by them. The mermaid also has this vague disregard for the kids. I've said this before, but again, she doesn't really care about them. She cares that the plague doctor cares. She's just kind of there to watch. So she also doesn't quite ever really care about what happens to them. The difference between the mermaid and the surgeons, though, is that the mermaid is able to break this cycle by realizing her love for the plague doctor. The plague doctor, who has been through an experience like this before because they've been cobbled together from other parts, they know what it means to be felt of as worthless. They care. And because of that, the mermaid cares. At the end, when the mermaid confesses her love, it's kind of this way for her to break this cycle of apathy and a way for her to realize that life, not just the meat of a person, but the actual life inside matters, which I think is really cool. However, being that this book is a horror, I wasn't left feeling horrified. Usually when I leave a horror, I'm kind of left like disgusted or sad. You don't really have to learn a lesson in horror, but I feel like all the horror that I like the most is the horror that makes me reflect upon some kind of idea or brings to light this point that otherwise couldn't have been brought up had it not ended a little bit dark. I feel like because the mermaid was able to break this cycle, I wasn't left with that final nail in the coffin. You know what I mean? If you are a fan of happy endings, then this was great. Because she and the plague doctor actually do get to live happily ever after. So if that's what you're into, that's awesome. Here's how I think it should have ended. I think that the whole book should have been the same. Up until after she takes the parts left over of the plague doctor and uses them to bring them back to life, I think instead she should have just eaten those parts. I know. Earlier in the book, she was eating the parts of the surgeons, and she said that she could taste on their flesh the fear of the kids that they had eaten or used the parts of before. She could like taste the saltiness of their fear. And if she could taste their fear, I'm wondering if she had eaten the plague doctor, if she would have been able to taste their love. And then in some way, the plague doctor still would have been with the mermaid forever, inside of her, close to her, where she could have protected him. You would have kind of finished the theme of we use people to our own means. She would have really reflected the surgeons well. The surgeons used other people to kind of sustain their own life, and she would have used the plague doctor as well to sustain her own life, confusing her love for the time that she spent with them with the love of like them, their meat. Everything that we have read in the book would have been reinforced. It would have reinforced the mermaid's vague disregard for life. I remember this part earlier in the book where she and the plague doctor were talking about something, and while they were discussing next to this frozen river, a lynx had walked across this frozen river, had fallen in, and had died. And they just continued on their conversation like normal. There's this idea that like life is just going to go on. It just doesn't matter. You're just going to keep going. The mermaid was sitting in the ashes of the destroyed kingdom, and she's like, oh well, time to go on. The plague doctor and the mermaid witnessed this horrible ritual, and the mermaid was like, I'm gonna go to bed. And I feel like she would have just eaten the plague doctor and then moved on, but got to carry that with her. She wouldn't have learned anything, which in a horror would have made it horrifying. It also, again, would have reflected the surgeons really well. Towards the end of the book, it's revealed that the plague doctor was actually an experiment done by the surgeons way back in time. That they were one of the first things that the surgeons had made in an experiment of body parts. And the plague doctor goes, do you even remember me? And the surgeons say, we don't remember meat. Again, the idea that you are just your body. And if the mermaid had eaten the plague doctor at the end, they would have just been their meat. which is sad, which is horrifying, but that's what I wanted from my horror. That's kind of the final nail in the coffin that I was looking for, and I feel like that would have taken this book from 4 stars to 5 stars. My rating. I gave it 4 stars. I think that I really did enjoy reading this book. Again, the premise was incredibly interesting. The prose, for the most part, was beautiful, and the theme was super cool. But it just didn't quite finish the thought. And that's what I was missing. I liked the happy ending. Don't get me wrong, love a happy ending. In my horror, though, I kind of want to be left with that feeling of dread. If I'm going to read a book that is scary, I want to be scared. I don't think it quite fulfilled its purpose, if I'm being honest. So on Goodreads, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's like a 4.3, but I had to round down. Sorry. So, the cover. You know, I'm trying to branch out a little bit more. It's been hard. I was one of those girls in high school that did like the 3/4 anime view all the time, and I want to break that cycle a little bit. I've been trying to do more interesting ideas lately, and I found this photo on Tumblr, and it was kind of my inspiration for doing this. The first go around I did was really bad, and I will post it one day when I feel confident. But I just did not like how it turned out. I did it a lot more zoomed out. I had the entire plague doctor there, not just the mask, and less gore, and like I did this whole background of a painted forest that I just did not do very good on. So this is technically my second attempt. I zoomed in a little more. I just put the mermaid with the plague doctor mask. I added some blood, and the swords were kind of iffy for me because I feel like I was already doing good, but I was like, I'm gonna throw them in there just because I think it's interesting. I changed the sword to a knife because I thought that would work a little better, and it did. So yeah, is it my favorite thing I've ever made? I don't know, but I'm just gonna take it and run. I think it's not too bad, and I don't know, if you saw this in the store, would you want to pick it up and read it? Maybe? I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it all the way through, it really means a lot to me. And if you want to see more, please subscribe and like this video. I want to come out with about 1 a week, so stay tuned for more, hopefully, if you like this. I certainly had a lot of fun making it. If you would like to see what I'm reading next and maybe follow along a little bit, I'm going to post in the description the list of books that I have in order. I believe that the next book is Love in the Big City. I'm gonna try to change up the genre so it's not like the same thing every time. You can find that list in the description. I can't promise that it won't change, but I'm gonna try to keep it relatively similar so that nothing too crazy happens. Again, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a good day. I'll see you next time.